When we study the books that our ruling classes have read, we catch a glimpse of the future that they are working toward. It turns out that even ruling class elites are deeply influenced by the culture they consume, implying that ordinary people can influence said elites by producing culture, by writing books, by making movies. Now, why do the books matter so much? Why do the movies matter so much? Well, there's circles of people around the project for the new American century, the ones that did 9/11 and invaded the Middle East. They extensively studied The Decline of the West, a book by German historian Oswald Spengler. So they saw civilizations in terms of cycles and feared that Western civilization was in its final stages of this cycle, fearing, for example, that China might take over. Others, in particular the American technocratic elites, such as Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook CEO, and many others, they must have read a number of books from Isaac Asimov's Foundation Cycles about vast interplanetary civilizations, and moreover, they're far-seeing bureaucratic elites, because nothing happens by coincidence anymore in that world of Isaac Asimov. Once the age of European colonization came to an end, Western men diverted their gaze toward the skies, dreaming of other worlds to discover and conquer, and above all, to exploit for more resources. The founder of Rhodesia, today's Zimbabwe, the man named Cecil Rhodes, a British imperialist who was also a rabid homosexual, driven by a hatred for women, so much so that he tried getting away as far as possible from women. He already dreamed of exploring space, saying, quote, "To think of these stars that you see overhead at night, these vast worlds which we can never reach, I would annex the planets if I could. I often think about that. It makes me sad to see them so clear and yet so far." He was writing in Africa, of course, where there were no cities with light pollution, so he could still see the stars clearly, which many of us nowadays can't do. I personally never even saw the Milky Way until I was 39 years old, and I was somewhere on the south side of the Crete Island in Greece, where there was no light pollution, and for the first time with my naked eye I could see the Milky Way, which I'd never seen before. Which is absurd because for eons our ancestors could always see the Milky Way at night because there was no light pollution. Now, having conquered Earth, meaning the European colonials, men driven by such escapist fantasies, such as Cecil Rhodes, could only dream of trading other worlds for profit. The billionaire founder of FedEx, the shipping company in the USA, formerly known as Kinko's, the founder, Paul Orfalia, echoed a somewhat similar statement in the 2006 documentary called The 1%, directed by the Johnson & Johnson heir, Jamie Johnson, saying, "One day, I'd like to go to the moon and look at the planet Earth and say, wow, there's part of my portfolio." A vast number of Hollywood movies since 1945 has explored this colonization of space. The arrival of aliens or the advancement of sentient robots, such as in movies such as The Terminator, Blade Runner, I, Robot, and so on, and modern ones, of course. Movies have also explored the potential dark side of space, such as the discovery of portals to hell, or the threat of more advanced civilizations that might consume or destroy the Earth, such as in the 2005's War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise. In part, Hollywood has served the propaganda efforts of the state. It then becomes clear that we are living in a world driven by the fantasies of greedy men and women looking to replace a still willful population with obedient, programmable robots. For what is the purpose of replacing human beings with machines and giving preference to machines, other than saying that the machines make fewer mistakes, don't need sleep, and must totally obey their programming, i.e., they're not human. The perfect slave for a wealthy elite looking to stay wealthy and in charge. By removing human will, one removes the threat of a human rebellion, e.g., the threat of a biohuman resistance against the robot age. I say biohuman because in the future, robots will look so human with the CIA face masks, for example, and totally human motorics, and you won't be able to distinguish one from the other. So we need a new name for us, the biohumans versus the technohumans, machines versus men of flesh and blood. Now, those working in the robot and space exploration industries today then are helping their technocratic masters advance humanity's subjugation to technology. The resources from space, of course, are what is necessary to build armies of humanoid robots. We don't even have enough resources to feed 8 billion people comfortably, so landing on planet Mars makes most sense if you plan to mine the nearby asteroid belt. There's an asteroid belt located between planets Mars and Jupiter, which is dreamed to be full of rare materials, including gold, all necessary for the high-tech age, for high-tech advanced civilization. Mars would then become a corporate transit hub for our solar system's resources, though such developments may take centuries rather than decades to materialize. Another elite book stands out in terms of relevance, namely the book Project Mars by the Dr. Wernher von Braun, the Nazi German rocket scientist. It details of a man elected to be Elon, a sort of governor of Earth responsible for colonizing and populating planet Mars. Now, surely Elon Musk's mother must have read this book since she named her son after this Elon, this fictional government position. And strangely, Musk has indeed embarked on precisely this mission to fulfill his mother's dream of colonizing Mars. Elon Musk is already being positioned as the man worth $1 trillion, the magic man, groomed to be the leader of the space age, the one whom humanity must follow, if only the people will believe it. Although, as in the case of Cecil Rhodes, this Muskian drive to get as far away as possible from Earth's mothers and women may be driven by some form of mental depravity. It must be understood that Elon Musk is, of course, part of a larger elite network. He is not at all the single genius individual we are supposed to take him for. Most of the dreamed fantasy technology that Elon Musk has been trying to sell us, such as the Neuralink, doesn't even work at all and wasn't even new, since previous attempts to link human brains to computers already achieved similar results decades ago. Tying the human brain to machinery, of course, doesn't just mean that human minds will be able to control technology directly with our thoughts, but rather that our thoughts will be inhibited and limited by technology to control human behavior. And they are not planning to let you know about this, of course, because the same technology that restricts your thoughts will also be able to make you believe that you are now truly free. You won't know. The goal, again, is not to advance individual human beings, but to subjugate humanity in the service of the wealthy elite by turning men and women who still have some degree of personal agency into willing slave droids, and to root out those who might still want to live for themselves. To understand more of this, we need to regard the current AI craze in tandem with Neuralink's attempts for the brain technology connection. All right? If we cannot create real artificial intelligence, maybe we can plug human brains into robot bodies, such as explored in Hollywood's RoboCop series, cyborgs and cybernetic organisms. To get humanity to accept this elite desire to use technology to subjugate humanity, the space quests need to be phrased in progressive terms. It's supposed to elevate humanity. We need an interplanetary civilization, for example, just in case our elites destroy Earth with their greed. And we need universities on Mars, of course, to preserve freedom of expression. Elon Musk University on planet Mars, at Tesla City, insofar the technology installed in our brains will still allow us to think at all. Now, the idea of a human resistance against the machines has, likewise, been thoroughly explored in Hollywood's movies, such as in the Terminator series. The development toward machine-operated planets, however, is presented as deterministic, namely that it would require a time machine to go back in time and prevent Skynet or some other AI mainframe computer from taking over. Barring a time machine, of course, these movies suggest that there is nothing we can do about it, and that the biohuman resistance, led by John Connor, against the technology will be wiped out by a robot foot stomping on our skulls. What remains then is the question whether AI is really intelligent, or whether it's all just a bizarre hoax, and whether the US-American bet on AI and robots is really going to pay off. There are some caveats, for example. Having studied the NASA space programs extensively, one must wonder why Elon Musk's rocket company had to buy Russian rockets to study how they work. Because NASA in the USA apparently totally forgot about all of their technology that supposedly took men to the moon. I say supposedly because the evidence of the Apollo moon program landings overwhelmingly points toward fraud. In 1968, for example, NASA Director James E. Webb resigned from his position as the administrator because he believed NASA wouldn't be able to put a man on the moon. At the time, NASA's industrial supply chain partners were scattered around the nation, and the parts that were supposed to be put together into a spaceship either didn't arrive, didn't fit, or couldn't even be produced at all because the technology needed didn't exist. Keeping the space industry scattered, of course, would later serve a handy divide and conquer tactic. Indeed, a year later, new NASA leadership somehow landed on the moon anyway in 1969 and did it in 12 months, doing what the former NASA administrator James Webb thought couldn't be done in 30 years. So how did they do it? Well, ultimately, the technology called front projection, used on the set of Stanley Kubrick's Space Odyssey 2001 movie, was simply reused to film the hoax. The most shocking aspect of all this isn't that Americans faked the moon landings, but rather that even today in 2025, we aren't able to take people to the moon and back, for the technology still doesn't exist and has never existed. Due to the Cold War conflict, which was really a conflict between two competing superpowers, the US State Department had an aggressive interest in dominating space, or at least keeping up the appearance of doing so, to demoralize the Russians, the competitors, and consolidate American status. After all, the most famously American adagio goes, "Fake it until you make it." Well, they faked it, and they're still trying to make it. People often complain that if the Apollo moon landings had been faked, at least some high-profile people involved in the scam would have spoken out. They would have said something. Well, indeed, they did. Bill Casing, for example, was a technical writer for Rocketdyne, NASA's rocket engine supplier. And he extensively exposed the hoax as early as 1976. Astronaut Gus Grissom, Virgil Grissom, once called the Apollo launch capsule a bucket of bolts and thought that the rocket and its equipment were so faulty that it couldn't even take anyone into lower orbit. He didn't believe the thing could fly. So it makes sense that Musk had to study Russian rockets. Americans never went to space until the development of the space shuttle, which, however, could only take passengers to lower orbit, to the International Space Station at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, not at all to actual outer space and nowhere near the moon. Why didn't we ever build a space station that could comfortably float between Earth and the moon? Was it too risky, or was it because we don't know how to do it? For further reading, one of the best books on the moon hoax is called One Small Step, The Great Moon Hoax and the Race to Dominate Earth from Space by German journalist Gerhard Wisniewski. The moon hoax, however, is but a small footnote in the far greater story of a vast civilization-wide economic trick. Our Western economies, I argue, aren't real, nor are most of the office jobs that people do. A lot of jobs just serve to trap people in busyness, i.e., activities meant to prevent people from revolting against the state. You work just enough hours to tire you, but not too many for you to decide to quit. You are paid just enough to live, but not enough to escape. What I'm trying to explain is that people in Western societies aren't free to develop their personal life trajectories. The state acts as a feudal lordship that, through passive and indirect controls, i.e., by setting and aggressively guarding the boundaries of individual freedom, forces people to direct much of their waking energy towards state goals, such as the US domination of Earth and space. American journalist H.L. Mencken phrased it as follows when referring to the outcome of the American Civil War. The American people, North and South, went into war as the citizens of their respective states and came out as subjects. From citizen to subject, have you not noticed, for example, that most rich people in the American-led West are boomers, and that those boomers have very specific interests? Their primary concern is extending their lives, staying young and healthy, and having, therefore, access to an array of boomer-positive technologies such as stair lifts, exoskeletons, organ transplants, service droids, low-cost immigrant labor, and household robots. Indeed, the Western world has completely and entirely arranged its economies to serve the interests of the old, at the total and fullest expense of the younger generations whose futures are being devoured to keep the elderly, who produce nothing, comfortably alive. This is what should be known as the Great Hoax, the Great Earth Hoax, namely the idea that technological progress is supposed to advance humanity when in reality it only serves to extend boomer longevity. Have you not seen, for example, the super old people in American politics refusing to retire, holding on to their jobs as though they were holding on to life? While the young aren't able to buy homes to start families in the USA, the largest group of home buyers is now over 70 years old. Instead of passing their wealth on to their already millennial and even Gen X children still struggling to buy a home, the boomers would rather spend all their money on 15-year-long end-of-life cruises to see the world. Younger people waiting to receive their inheritance should adjust their expectations, for even if the boomers don't burn their cash themselves, the state will rob the inheritance with 100% tax in order to afford the aspirations of other boomer elites. We are not dealing with an issue of this or that political system, of democracy versus fascism, or liberalism versus puritanism, but rather we are dealing with a criminal and greedy elite that owns the whole economy and has no real vision for the future survival of their people, because they're too selfish to care. Not only have working-class white natives of the Western countries already been replaced by immigrant service populations, reducing the cost of boomer maintenance while still increasing rents and lowering wages, but now even immigrants might get replaced with robots and algorithms. The economy is fake because it doesn't at all service the healthier interests of a people looking to preserve its long-term survival. If technological developments, including space exploration, only serve to create robots that boomers might one day transfer their brains into so that they can live forever as cybernetic organisms, then we should wonder why the young haven't revolted against their elders yet. Where is the biohuman resistance against technocracy? The answer is, of course, democracy. The old people over 50 are now electoral majorities in nearly every Western country and will remain so for at least another 20 years despite mass immigration of younger people. So let me recap what is going on here. We are presently waging war in eastern Ukraine to secure there the raw materials needed for AI, robots, data centers, and space exploration in a proxy war competing against China. We are colonizing space next, then, to mine the resources found among the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter and beyond, in order to build the massive armies of hundreds of millions of household and military robots needed to serve the boomers. We have totally arranged our economies and our technological developmental base in the service of extending the longevity of the boomer generations. And we are devouring the younger native white generations in the process. Elon Musk said that he believes that in 20 years' time there will be more humanoid robots than humans walking the earth. But this dream can only materialize by an extreme reduction of human childbirths. For the resources directed toward robotics will be taken away from what is needed to birth and rear human children. Clearly, something may easily go wrong. Namely, we will either run out of resources or we will run out of energy to acquire them. Of course, both of these scenarios will happen at the same time, for what we are experiencing now is really a psychological process. Elderly people, so afraid of death, i.e. they are thanatophobic, that they are using all their means to pretend that they can be young again and live forever. This process comes to its natural end when the boomer generations naturally die off anyway. And the most insecure, selfish generation of all Western history must lie in its grave. Once the boomer generation does die off, the high demand for resources, for energy, immigrants, and robots will collapse overnight as the younger generations realize they can do with a lot less now that the burden of care of their elders has disappeared. The lesson here is that much of what we call technology is really only there to support elderly people. And that technology itself, therefore, is a symptom of a dying civilization. After the death of such dying civilizations, the survivors shall reorganize themselves closer to nature. The survivors will find that religion and spirituality, once again, will serve them better. Every dwindling end brings forth a vigorous new beginning. And so instead of a space age, we should be preparing for the new heroic age, namely here on planet Earth, after the biohuman resistance defeats technology.